Hello, welcome to the stream. I'm Imran Gardner sitting in for Derek Ashong. Derek's just away for a short while. I'll be here for the rest of the week, and welcome to the pre-show of the stream. We'll be going live on TV on Al Jazeera English in just about 5 or 6 minutes time. But let's give you a taste as to what's ahead. We've got Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, sexual harassment in Lebanon and Egypt, and much, much more. Joining us as always, Ahmed Shihabuddin is here, and we're also delighted to welcome Natasha Fatah to our studio. We'll give a proper introduction to her during the live show. But for the moment, because we don't have too much time in the pre-show, Ahmed, give us a taste as to some of the stories that we've been covering and some of the feedback that we have. Let's start perhaps with the Saudi women who want to grab the wheel and get on the roads.
Right, pedal to the metal, I guess. This story actually was suggested to us by the Logiker, who is in Saudi herself. And I thought it was appropriate since we covered it on the show a couple of days ago. And I'm sure you're familiar with the story. On June 17th, several people organized in Saudi Arabia to demand basically the right to drive. And I'm going to start with this tweet that came in. The Logiker herself participated in the actual driving movement. So she said a total of 59 ladies have driven around the kingdom since June 17th. So she's just basically sharing with us the numbers and then using that same hashtag that originated the entire story, which is woman to drive. She said, in this tweet, that she was actually number 55. So one of the women themselves actually sharing with us this story. And then a bit later, she says a little anecdote I thought I'd mention, which is that her dad gave her, as you can see here, a 10-minute first driving lesson. And she claims she did horribly, but she called it awesome.
5-point check.
Yeah, exactly.
I love this story because I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I spent 10 years there. My sister was born there. And, part of the reason we had to leave is because she and I would not have been afforded the rights that men would have been afforded, and including being able to drive. So Saudi Arabia, I believe, is a society that needs a major overhaul, but this is a good first step.
When you say good first step, and we have to move on, but as a final comment on this, it's not because women have an insatiable appetite to drive per se in Saudi. It's a lot deeper.
It's an insatiable appetite to be equal to men.
Right.
And it's worth saying, women can, by law are meant to be paid the same salary in the workplace, but yet are unable to drive. And even, just quickly to note, on YouTube, many women, prominent women in the Western world are being asked to participate in this campaign, but also the Saudi Arabian princess herself, Amira Tawil, has been speaking out about this issue. So.
Okay, Ahmed, something that I had absolutely no clue about. I'm an economic illiterate.
Yeah.
The Bitcoin.
Yes.
There's an update on that.
There is an update on this story. So we basically talked about Bitcoin, which is this currency online. It's essentially a virtual currency. So you could say virtual cash that can be used for all kinds of things, illicit things, but also you could buy essentially anything that's available online. I'm not going to get into it specifically so as not to make it more complicated. But it's worth saying that what happened now is that it's been hacked. So this kind of community or network has been hacked. And people are saying, as you can see right here, that it seems that there's been as many as 500,000 coins missing. So that's, people have said it's an estimated, between $8 to $17 million are missing. And it used to be that $17 was the worth of one Bitcoin. And now, because of all this, it's dropped to, I think, pennies, mere pennies, in just a matter of a couple.
So you got to go out and buy your shares now.
Yeah, right. Shares.
Does it mean anything?
I don't get it.
I
I need to go and read up on this because, to be honest, it does seem quite meaningless and quite abstract at this moment in time to most of us. Okay, Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president, has been speaking. His speech, no doubt, has elicited a lot of response. Have people felt placated? Have they felt that he's been listening to their demands?
Yeah, just a couple quick tweets on this issue. Marath Amran saying, "This is reform?" Because immediately after the speech, more than 50 students were arrested, allegedly, at Aleppo University. Of course, we're following the story on our live blog for people who are interested in following the story. And it seems that there's been essentially thousands of protesters taken to the streets across Syria to basically say that, they're dismissing the speech and his, so to speak, integrity, just as they feel that he's been dismissing their demands and their concerns. And even mapping out, as you can see here, in Syria, areas where just today, on June 20th, people have been rising up to protest his speech, feeling as though he's not taking the situation seriously.
Okay, before we look at our final quirky story, before we actually go live, let me introduce you to our guest who's going to be joining us via Skype to talk about the Muslim Brotherhood and its potential impact on the future of Egypt, and whether it's at a crossroads or not. Ibrahim Al-Hudaybi will be joining us throughout the duration of the program. Ibrahim, welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing your thoughts. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. If you need a bathroom break, you have about 2 minutes before we actually go live. But it's going to be fascinating hearing your thoughts and discussing the role of religion, secularism, the new Egypt, the old Egypt, all sorts of fascinating permutations ahead. Ibrahim, thanks for joining us. Look forward to speaking to you on the air in a couple of minutes' time. Now, Ahmed, very finally, there's an Indian village that's called Snapdeal.com Nagar.
Yes.
Why on earth is it called that?
It's a great question. Apparently, I mean, how about you were talking about this? Why don't you tell us a little bit about this site?
Well, from what I understand, Snapdeal, which is a group coupon website, they've pumped in a bunch of money into this tiny town, and
as a result,
out of sheer kindness, the town has changed their name to Snapdeal.com Nagar, which, in any other situation might be problematic, and commercialism and capitalism versus the people and all this stuff. But I really think this is just a gesture of two kindnesses, the kindness of the company and of the village saying thank you for helping us out. So as much as I want to rail against the corporate world, I think this is a really sweet story.
I don't know if we have time, but you mentioned an interesting anecdote that this might not be such a new thing in India.
Yeah, I was in a place called Jamshedpur in India, in Jharkhand state. And because it's the heart of Tata, the car manufacturer, and they have all their steel plants there, it's popularly known as Tata Nagar. So in that sense, this may not be a new thing. Maybe stream.aljazeera.com may be onto something here.
Yeah, perhaps. Perhaps.
All right, well, Natasha and Ahmed, both of you stay with us. We've got a packed program. It's going to be interesting to see if we can fit it all in to 25 minutes or so. This is the pre-show. We're going to have a post-show for about 10 to 15 minutes after our show on Al Jazeera English. So stay with us. The Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, as well as sexual harassment in Lebanon and Egypt, plus looking at all the different trends in the social networking world. Stay with us on the other side of this. Hello, I'm Imran Garda, filling in for Derek Ashong. You're in the stream, a social online community with its very own TV show. And this is it. We're bringing you the stories that are ongoing, global, and sourced from social media. Today, Egyptians are talking about the role of Islam in their country's future. And they're doing it in 140 characters. And bloggers declare an end to sexual harassment. But is anyone listening? Our digital producer Ahmed Shihabuddin is here as always, tracking your feedback, and also next to him joining us on the couch is Natasha Fatah, a journalist and a columnist who focuses on minority communities. Natasha, give us a taste as to what your column is about and the work you do in general.
My purpose is to sort of shed light on minority communities, be they ethnic, religious, or economic, in the Western world, and how international stories connect with them. And of course, social media has revolutionized the way we communicate with one another. It's made the world a very small place. So I kind of talk about that in my column as well.
There's going to be a lot of convergence between social networking, what you're mentioning, and of course a lot of the issues that you're passionate about during this program. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts along with our other guests throughout the duration of the program. Well, since Egypt's popular uprising, many have wondered what role, if any, religion should play in the country's future. It's a fairly complicated and difficult discussion to have under any circumstance. But one group of young Egyptians is trying to do it in 140 characters. Have a look. This is their poster. It's called the Tweet Nadwa, and it's got the hashtag Tweet Nadwa, which actually means tweet gathering or symposium. And online organizers invited activists to have the same frank discussions they're already having via Twitter in a public forum. And it was a success. Hundreds turned out to discuss the role of Islam. Many others tweeted into the meeting. Well, to include a multitude of voices, the rules were that the attendees were limited to 140 seconds for their comments. Well, earlier we spoke with Tweet Nadwa organizer Ala Abdel Fattah about the idea behind this kind of conversation. And let's have a listen to what he had to say.
And I remember, facilitating or organizing many of these discussion circles during the sit-in. So I thought, let's try and do something that mixes both feelings, get the Twitter community to participate in an offline discussion that is inspired by the discussion circles that we have in Tahrir Square. And that's it. We thought, let's start with the independent Islamist.
Well, this is basically taking Tahrir to the next square. Sorry, the line was a bit sketchy there, but Ala Abdel Fattah talking generally about why this was so necessary for him and for all of those involved in Egypt's revolution and the next step forward. The views expressed in that first tweet, Nadwa, were quite wide-ranging, and they included those who fear the Muslim Brotherhood. Others argued that Islam is a system that encompasses everything. Well, joining us now via Skype from Cairo to discuss this is Ibrahim Al-Hudaybi. He's a columnist and featured speaker at the first Tweet Nadwa. He's also a former member of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. Ibrahim, great pleasure to have you with us. Why do you think the Tweet Nadwa was so necessary and vital at this moment in Egypt's history?
First of all, I think it's useful because we got the chance to talk to each other, to listen to each other, and a lot of jargon was left behind because of the 140 seconds thing. So that meant that you had to make a point, and to make a point which is either a response to another person's point or.
Okay, unfortunately, Ibrahim, we have a bit of a problem with the line there with Ibrahim. It's a bit stop-start. We're going to try and get him back. He spoke about how important it was to actually start this discussion. Let me ask you, Ahmed. I mean, you spent a fair amount of your upbringing in Egypt.
Right.
You followed the revolution closely and the post-revolution Egypt. The honeymoon period is over now. Egyptians have to get together now and discuss what's going to work for the interests of all Egyptians. How central is the discussion over Islamism and the Muslim Brotherhood to taking the country forward?
It's a great question. I think it's a question that was definitely addressed at this Tweet Nadwa. I spoke to Ala, who's one of the young activists that's been involved in this. And I think, before we start looking at this, it's important to note that 70% of Egypt's population is under the age of 29. So the future really lies, in their hands. And when I spoke to her and others, Ala, forgive me, and others, they really highlighted the role in which the youth is kind of straying away from the Muslim Brotherhood's elder kind of elite leadership, in the sense that they are much more concerned, or at least segments of that group, are much more concerned with unemployment, which plagues 80% of this population that's under the age of 29, than, perhaps using Sharia law as a foundation for any political system. So there's a lot of debates, and, of course, in the West as well, and even online, for example, one tweet that just came in before we even got to have Ibrahim there, from H. Loskuwak, is saying the world needs a strong separation of politics and religion. So as to whether this will actually happen in Egypt, if we'll see a secular future or maybe one based in Sharia law, is still to be debated.
Well, I think the concern for many is that when Egypt was sort of erupting and this incredible movement was taking place, it sort of came from the grassroots. It didn't come from the Muslim Brotherhood. Most analysts would agree that the Brotherhood wasn't involved in that. And you had so many young people, as you mentioned, there saying we want democracy, we want equal rights for women, we want the lifestyle and the equality that's available in the West. We do want that here. We don't want to be suppressed under a dictatorship anymore. But the problem became that no one wanted to be the voice of that movement. Even Wael, who worked for Google, who was arrested, the Western media had sort of propped him up as being the leader. He said, no, I don't want to speak on behalf of this entire movement. And while that's very noble and romantic, what it ended up doing is creating this huge vacuum that someone eventually would have to fill.
Right.
And now that the movement has stopped and the elections will come, it looks like the Brotherhood is going to step in, which is a point that worries a lot of secularists in Egypt.
Well,
and outside
Ahmed,
Egypt.
Yeah.
The fact that the Brotherhood kept a low profile
Right.
during
Yeah.
the Egyptian revolution in some obscure way even made people fear them more because they felt there's some sort of strategy
Right.
at play here. Give us some insight into that thinking.
Yeah, what happened is, for example, in the first, Tahrir movement, we saw that a lot of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders were there, but in the second one, when people continued to want to demand these kinds of, changes, they really urged that the youth did not go and participate in this. And what we saw, as I said again, is that the youth started to move away from this. And the Muslim Brotherhood's been positioning themselves to have, a majority and have influence in the future of Egypt's governing, but not to be held accountable, perhaps, because they're not really vying for, at least formally, the presidential elections. They're merely saying that they want to be active. And I think Ibrahim also, when we spoke to him earlier, suggested that they have two choices. Either they widen their groups and try and, have partnerships and alliances with groups like the Weft Party, which they already, in the past week, have already started to, align themselves with this liberal group called the Weft Party, or they, retreat into their underline, which is, really being not extremist, but let's say conservative and not really being inclusive. A lot of people are worried as to what this all might mean. I mean, one tweet we have on this issue coming in from Ann Slayton is that they have a wide support base, which is, he's referring to the Muslim Brotherhood, but they really have no plan, and that's what's worrying a lot of people. Is, they've created this party, the Justice and Freedom Party. Many people say that it's mirrored after the Turkish party, the Justice and Development Party. So the question is, as Ann Slayton saying, if anything, he's saying be afraid if they take power and stall the government, meaning that they're positioning themselves, claiming they don't want to come into power, they just want to have participatory role, and then perhaps many people are worried that once they do have that role, they will continue to eventually dominate the political sphere in Egypt.
I mean, even this diversification idea of splintering off into different parties, that doesn't actually address the thing, because it's kind of like communist Europe. You have 5 or 6 different parties but if they're all basically communist or socialist, or if they're all sort of Islamist or conservative, you can call the parties whatever you want, but if the underlying agenda is for an Islamist state, we don't know that for certain yet, but if that's what we're driving towards, it doesn't really alleviate the concerns for many people.
Well, something that I noticed from sampling some of those tweets from the Tweet Nadwa, and just in general, I'm quite a newbie to Twitter, but in general on social networking, Facebook, etc., you had a lot of young Egyptians who identify themselves as practicing Muslims, Islamists of some form. However, they felt insulted that people pigeonholed them as Muslim Brotherhood, Salafis, or hardliners, and then there's this sort of cartoon guilt by association that goes on in the West. So, for example, one of the ideologues of the Muslim Brotherhood was Sayyid Qutb, and Osama bin Laden read Sayyid Qutb, so everybody who's attached to the Brotherhood supports Osama bin Laden. I find there's a lot of this kind of fighting back via social media in terms of how they are perceived by the outside world. Would you, care to comment on that? Do you think that is a positive trend? Because I certainly see it as one.
It's something that definitely needs to be discussed further, because there is a distinction between an Islamist and a Muslim, at least for me. You can be as conservative or as hardline as you want in your private life, and you're practicing Muslim. But if you're an Islamist, that's a political agenda, and that's the problem for many people with the Muslim Brotherhood. It's an Islamist agenda where you want the implementation of Sharia law. You don't see men and women as equal citizens. There are no protections for Coptic Christians and other minority groups. So if you're a practicing Muslim, that's nobody's business. That's your private life. But if you're an Islamist, that is potentially a point of concern, because you want to affect the public sphere through politics.
But I'd like to get Ahmed's view on this, because Ahmed, again, your finger is on the pulse of the Egyptian street. You're closer to those diverse views from within Egypt. As fair as Natasha's point is, you have Egyptians saying, yes, I'm an Islamist, but that doesn't mean I'm against the rights of minorities, of Copts, of women, and that there are different ways of interpreting what an Islamist means. Is this Tweet Nadwa and the other developments that we're seeing opening the door to having those discussions, to seeing the varying shades of Islamism even?
I think what it does, as you said, is it really introduces a lot of nuances and a nuanced perspective, which, again, I don't mean to focus on the youth, but it's important to, because a lot of them, they said in the first Tweet Nadwa that they felt disillusioned with the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood for the sole purpose and reason being that the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't accommodate their questioning and their nuanced opinions. You know, being an Islamist doesn't necessarily that you have to have one hard-line vantage point or perspective. And this tweet, actually, Baz Ramit is saying, the Muslim Brotherhood seems more interested in speeding up the election time than calling the military's human rights abuses and democratic violations. And it's important to note that the Muslim Brotherhood is the most well-organized political group in Egypt, despite having been banned for decades under Mubarak. And so for them, with the parliamentary elections coming in September, they want to just move things along so that they can, you know, prevent other groups who might be able to accommodate some of the concerns of the youth, where they have a more balanced or a more nuanced take on, you know, their conservative standpoint. And so, you know, it's interesting that this is a point that we've been hearing at the tweet Nadwa, but also from the actual leadership themselves.
Good news, Ibrahim is back. We have a clear stream to him. Excuse the pun. Ibrahim, welcome back. I hope this time it will last. I hope the internet connection is decent enough. We've spoken a little bit about the Ikhwan. We've spoken a little bit about the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and its role and its definition. I suppose, let me start off with a nexus of the fear from the outside, from many who fear the Muslim Brotherhood and who fear Islamism in general. The theory goes that the Muslim Brotherhood, even if it participates in democratic elections, will only use democracy as a ladder to climb up to theocracy, and then they'll kick away the ladder for nobody else to climb up again. Is that fear relevant to the Egyptian experience today?
I don't think it is. I think I believe in the people. I believe in the people of this country who were able to oust Mubarak after 30 years in power. No one else can come to power and just hold on to it against the will of the people. I mean, this is not even something that I could perceive in any possible way. And I just like to comment on something else that has been said. The idea of Sharia being a threat to minority rights or to women's rights and women not being equal and so forth. I know that, in fact, there are some interpretations of Sharia that discourage equality and that discourage, don't give equal citizenship rights to minorities and so forth. But we have also to understand that the political spectrum, it's a continuum, and the Islamist spectrum is continuum. And while not only all Islamists, but the vast majority of Egyptians, over 90% of Egyptians endorse the notion of Sharia. 97% of Egyptians, according to a Gallup statistic, view religion as being important in their lives, and even in their public lives. Over 70% of Egyptians want to see an advisory role for religious scholars in political affairs. But that doesn't mean that they don't want equality. That doesn't mean that they don't want equal citizenship rights. They don't want women's rights and so forth, because there are different interpretations of Sharia. And John Esposito and Daria Mujahid in their book, Who Speaks for Islam, make a very insightful statement when they say Sharia means different things for different Muslims. And it is always important to make this distinction between Sharia and what a particular Islamist movement wants, because that's the problem with the secular liberal elite in the country, because when they challenge Islamists, because they challenge the very notion of Sharia and not only the political program presented by a particular Islamist movement, that leads to resistance from the society, which is a predominantly religious society that would not accept the challenge of its foundational pillars.
Okay, let's get Natasha's comment on this, because she was quite passionate about this. Ibrahim saying that even the call for Sharia and even the aspiration for Sharia to be involved in political life is not a monolith.
Right.
It depends on interpretation, and therefore Islamism can't be seen as a monolith.
Mm-hmm. That's perfectly fine. And Ibrahim, the people who ousted Mubarak also said clearly that they weren't fighting on behalf of Islam. They wanted democracy. Again and again, people said they wanted democracy. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you're correct and people want Sharia law. Who's going to decide what kind of Sharia law? If you're saying there's a wide spectrum, the beauty of democracy is you vote.
Okay,
Ibrahim. Who decides?
Okay, Natasha, let's get Ibrahim's response to that.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. And people didn't ask for Sharia, but we also have, lots of statistics that say that the vast majority of Egyptians want the people, because Sharia is not this monolithic body. The Egyptian state, the former regime, did not violate Sharia in any way, by the way. Did not violate Sharia except in matters of human rights and so forth. But its legislation was not anti-Sharia. And this is the most serious problems here are that, the endorsement of the Saudi model or the Iranian model when it comes to civil rights and so forth causes lots of fear. And I, as an Egyptian citizen, wouldn't like to live in a context like that by any.
Okay, unfortunately we've lost Ibrahim again. Ibrahim, if you can hear me, we sincerely thank you. It's a great pity that we didn't have you for the full 10 minutes or so that we wanted you for, but we did get the gist of Ibrahim's message there. Fascinating discussion. The next tweet, Nadwa, is on the 21st. That's tomorrow, on Tuesday. No doubt these issues will be cooked up again and fleshed out by Egyptians themselves, so we'll be following that as well on the stream. You can find out more details about the tweet, Nadwa, on our website, stream.aljazeera.com. There it is. The hashtag tweet Nadwa takes on the role of the Muslim Brotherhood. Next one is tomorrow. And you can also find an opinion piece by our very own Ahmed Shihabuddin, as well as many more stories. Ahmed.
It's a shame, as you said, we weren't able to get his opinions because there were many questions coming in on Twitter, but maybe we'll tweet them to him and he'll respond there. Now, if you're new to social media, what makes it so powerful is the ability to follow what's being said about a story anywhere in the world and in real time. And the key to all this is the Twitter hashtag. So we'll be sharing a few of the stories you're following, but first, here's how Twitter hashtags work. So if you want to give it a try, put a hashtag that interests you into Twitter's search box, and you can follow everything that's tweeted on that topic. Try it out. Here's some hashtags your fellow viewers are following in the stream.
Thanks for that, Ahmed. Now, sexual harassment is intimidation, bullying, or coercion of a sexual nature, and its impact can be devastating. Let's have a look at this. Okay, that's a slightly humorous look at that. That's Salwa giving her pervert chauvinist boss a good old slap for trying to give her a
think
promotion.
that guy interviewed me once. He looks very familiar.
Yeah, kind of sleazy. Right. But no men like that exist in this building, I promise you. Well, it's an age-old phenomenon, and of course it occurs in every culture. But can that type of transparency and crowdsourcing social media offers bring greater awareness and actually help stem harassment? Let's give you an example of what's being done over here. This is June the 20th to-do list, and it's from Egypt to Lebanon. I'll be blogging against sexual harassment, sharing video stories, poetry, films, and that's on the 20th. That's the goal of anti-harassment campaigners in Lebanon and Egypt. They're organizing around the hashtag EndSH for End Sexual Harassment, and they've declared June the 20th a day of blogging and tweeting against sexual violence. Well, joining us now via Skype from Beirut to discuss this is Alex Shems. He's the creator of Resist Harassment Lebanon website. Alex, welcome to the stream. You're a man in Beirut. Why is this so important to you? Why is it so relevant to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's a problem that we're encountering throughout society, and it's not something that's being discussed. I mean, personally, I wasn't aware of it, and then I began to talk to many of my friends who are women, and hearing about how prevalent it was and how much it was disrupting their daily lives really made me interested in the issue and interested in sharing it. So, and that's sort of why we started to create the blog.
Alex, I'm really struggling to hear you absolutely clearly. I did get, the gist of what you had to say. Hopefully, the line improves a little bit better. One of my main questions is this something that is a specific problem to Beirut or to Cairo, to Lebanon and Egypt in general, or is there not an argument to say yes, men have a tendency to act like pigs the world over in a very chauvinistic, patronizing way? Is there something that makes it any worse or any different in these particular places?
Well, in our activism, we try not to pathologize sexual harassment as something specific to the Middle East or specific to Beirut, but to look at it as a symptom of patriarchy, of male dominance in society, which occurs the world over. However, the ways in which patriarchy manifests itself in every society is different. So, for example, in Beirut and in Cairo, it seems that patriarchy more often manifests itself in an attempt to deny women the right to the public sphere.
Okay.
And this is why we see harassment as a major issue.
Okay, Natasha wants to come in here quickly.
Yeah, Alex, we know the vast majority of women have expressed that they've been sexually harassed in some way or the other. But the men who admit that they've done the sexual harassment, what do they say? How do they perceive their behavior?
I mean, often, unfortunately, it seems that for many men it's something funny, it's a joke, and they don't take it seriously. So even men, for example, who don't harass women, will often tend to think that women are exaggerating, or that when women talk about the issue, it's not something serious or something that actually impedes their ability to lead their daily lives. Which is definitely one of the main reasons which we set up the blog, is to have a space first for women to be able to talk about the issue and to share their experiences and to share how they're resisting harassment.
Alex, we're struggling to hear you, and we have to cut you off because we're running out of time. But stay where you are because we do have a post-show that takes place online. Alex, thanks a lot. Natasha, Ahmed, thank you very much. Stay with us for the post-show. You can learn more about that campaign against sexual harassment in Egypt and Lebanon and elsewhere, and continue this conversation by joining us in the post-show by going to stream.aljazeera.com. If you're on the TV show, we'll see you next time. Welcome back. You're watching The Post Show with me, Imran Garda, sitting in for Derek Ashong. Ahmed Shahabuddin is with us. Natasha Fatah is with us as well. We're struggling to hear Alex. We'll try and get him back again. Natasha, I could see you, perk your body up and get ready to discuss this for 5 hours if you could. It's a controversial issue. Mm-hmm. It's an issue that's not going to be wrapped up in a 3-minute discussion at the end of a TV show. However, do you think that it's encouraging that a campaign of sorts has kicked off in Lebanon and Egypt?
Absolutely. I think this is an issue that definitely needs to be addressed. And I'm so glad it's a person named Alex, a guy who started this, that when I read about the story, I was ready for Nosheen or Jamila or someone to have started it, but someone named Alex, and I'm so impressed. And I think it takes a lot of guts. And he was very specific to say this isn't a problem within the Middle East, and he's absolutely right about that. But there are social mores and norms that allow behavior to go unchecked in certain parts of the world versus others. So, as I mentioned in the pre-show, I lived in Saudi Arabia for 10 years. I was a young girl, but you couldn't get through a day without someone yelling, Habibi, Habibi,
but I mean, I grew up in South Africa, and I've spent time in the quote-unquote West. Are you saying that men are more chauvinistic in these countries than in Western countries?
I think the behavior goes unchecked more in certain parts
of the world. You probably get, somebody grabbing you if you walk the streets of Rome. It's not unlikely.
Well, it's behavior that's accepted in Rome, but it's certainly not behavior that's accepted in Berlin.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'll say is, like, I grew up in Egypt, as has been said several times on this program. No, but frankly, you know, in Egypt, the term I think that's for women who have been catcalled in Egypt, including actually, let me just go to it, our very own Shireen Tadros, who used this hashtag #EndSH to tweet. I can't remember the first time I was sexually harassed, but the last time was during the Egyptian Revolution, the night Mubarakites stormed Tahrir. So perhaps one of the sounds that she heard, and you know, anyone living in Egypt, perhaps an inside joke is the pss, 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 because that's the way they do it in Egypt. But a lot of people are raising the point that you raised, which is, Buki Lils is saying, they don't believe the internet presence alone will solve the issue, but breaking the taboo on talking about it is the first step to ending it. And the way in which the taboo is being broken, we didn't get to it in the TV program, but as you know, mapping is being used, you know, in social media to really illuminate issues that otherwise aren't discussed or that are taboo. But in this particular story, we see qawami harassment. And qawami means, you know, a kind of challenge harassment in Arabic. And you see here in Beirut, there's many different markers showing places where people have reported being sexually harassed.
Lots of activity on the Corniche.
Yes, of course. Well, that's actually a very famous spot right there for that and for other things. I'm just going to close out of this. Just saw some profanity, so we'll switch out of that. But you know, doing TV on the live, even online. One other thing I'll just quickly throw in there is Hafsa86 is saying, you know, a lot of people, the whole concept of this is that people are crowdsourcing where they've been harassed and in what form.
Right.
They're kind of documenting this. She says, I was harassed walking in the street by a policeman just 2 weeks ago in an affluent part of Cairo. So she's using this to illuminate the fact that problems run much deeper than just...
And there are a lot of, I think there are a lot of misconceptions, because what she's pointing to is that it doesn't just happen in the sort of poor, rundown areas where boys are, you know, very desperate because they don't have any economic opportunities. Let's bring Alex back now, because one of the other misconceptions that I want to try and address as well is we hear quite often from, and this ties into our previous topic as well, we hear quite often from women who wear the hijab, they wear the veil. They say that they are equally harassed as women who don't. And in that sense, I think it addresses that misconception that if you dress in a sexier way, there's a greater likelihood for you to be harassed. From your findings, is it consistent with what I've just mentioned now?
No, I completely agree. And as with the person who tweeted saying that they experienced harassment in an affluent area, one of the points with the map was to show that this is happening everywhere in Beirut. And women, no matter how they're dressing or how they're acting, are being targeted by it. And I think to counter ideas that it has to do with modesty specifically or Islam in some way, but to sort of to show the fact and clarify the fact that it does have to do with male dominance in society and male dominance over space, which is a fact throughout the city.
Have you had any male pressure or male rejection to this campaign that you've thought up? Has anybody insulted you? Has anybody said you're wasting your time?
I mean, so far most of the men that have been in contact with it have either been supporters, people who have submitted stories, or people who didn't think about the issue before and then were able to learn something or two. So until this point, we haven't really had a negative counter-reaction from them.
Alex Shams, thank you very much, and I'm glad that we could hear you loud and clear now in the post-show. Great to hear your thoughts. Good luck with your campaign, and we will no doubt be following up on your campaign and the way it unfolds. Alex Shams there joining us from Beirut there. Final comments on this issue before we move on, Natasha?
I love that they're shaming guys into good behavior. Love it.
Ahmed?
I won't comment on that, but I really do. I'm always fascinated by the fact that people use maps and these kinds of issues, you know, that all started, many of which on the Ushahidi platform, to really document issues that otherwise would be really complex issues to tackle. So using visuals makes it relatable to people, you know, who have never been to Beirut, but who can see, as you did very quickly, oh, it's on the Corniche. There's a, you know, increased number. So if they ever were to go, who knows, it might inform their decisions.
Just a reminder, you're watching the post-show of the stream. And usually there's a guy who's far better looking in this particular seat. He's not in the seat, he's actually online, and he's also joining us via Skype from Jerusalem. Derek Ashong is not in this seat, he's in that seat. He's still got the inimitable look and the what's the word? I'm looking for the right adjective to describe your necklace because it's a work of art, isn't it?
Just
and the
call it
headphones.
Aquapolitan.
Yeah. Derek Ashong's in Jerusalem. Derek, tell your adoring fans why you're there.
Well, first of all, Imran, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for stepping in to fill these shoes. You're doing an amazing job. I'm loving today's show. Hi, Ahmed and Natasha. I'm actually here in Jerusalem learning a little bit more about the nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and some of what is being done to try to resolve it. So we've been meeting with leaders in the Israeli side, leaders on the Palestinian side, trying to get deeper into the nuance of what's really going on. And we're going to be attending a conference hosted by Shimon Peres to discuss some of these issues.
And I understand on Wednesday we're going to be discussing some of this with you and perhaps some guests from Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories.
Yes, I've been meeting a number of really interesting people, and I'm going to see if I can get one person just come to sit with me so that we can have a broader discussion about some of these issues and see if people have a genuine hope for a resolution to the conflict.
Okay, Derek, stay where you are. Let's give the viewer a taste of what's coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be talking Tunisia, Ahmed, and the proposed almost a reversal of media laws. Potentially.
Right.
A lot of people are scared about that. But also related to Tunisia, we've had news in the past 24 hours, Zain al-Abidine bin Ali saying, I was duped.
Right.
Nobody told me to leave the country. They said, just go out for a short while and you can come back in because your safety is in danger.
Right.
Any reaction to that online?
Yeah, there's lots of reaction. You can follow this story. You can follow it, but also our viewers, if you're at home, on our live blog, you can see what he's been saying. For example, in a statement issued by his lawyers, as you can see here, he said he had agreed to take a plane to Saudi Arabia under the illusion that he would, or not the illusion, under the idea that he would come back and return immediately. One thing that we're seeing that I think is really incredible, which marks the use of social media, is the fact that photos from the actual trial are being shared on YFrog on Twitter.
They've got 18 charges against him. He's been tried in absentia.
Right.
And they're showing all sorts of dosh and goodies from the house.
From the actual trial. Yeah, let me show you some of these. These actually surfaced several weeks ago, but people are using them again in their tweets, commenting on what a lot of people are saying is the ridiculous nature of this entire story as it's been playing out while he's in absentia.
That's nuts. I mean, look at that. That's out of a cartoon. Stacks and stacks of cash.
Right.
And I mean, Ben Ali's latest thing that I didn't know I was duped. I mean, what does that say about your intellect, your credibility? I don't know.
Some of the charges, some of the 18 charges,
I mean,
drugs,
just
weapons,
doesn't
and the small matter of controlling or holding just a third of the entire country's wealth. Derek, one of the reasons why this is important is there probably wouldn't be a stream. There wouldn't be this show if Tunisia hadn't happened and we hadn't seen this mass spasm of social media and activism in Tunisia and then Egypt and Libya and elsewhere. Tunisia is the starting point in a different history, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the show had relevance and people were discussing it prior to that. But what Tunisia did is it codified the power of technology to empower people to make change in their lives. And I think that hopefully what's happening with Ben Ali will put other leaders on notice that if they're committing crimes against their people, ultimately they may very well be held to account.
And from our special guest, Natasha, because we've only got about a minute left on the program, final thoughts as you wrap up the post-show? Well,
I'm just so curious about Jerusalem. I've never been. Any immediate observations, Derek?
It's a beautiful place. It's a historic place. It's a very sad place. So many people claim it in the name of God and are willing to work towards that, but not work with each other. Learning a lot, though.
Have fun.
Forgive me to quickly sidetrack backwards, but we got this tweet in Bashir Omran claiming that the judge has ruled that Ben Ali and his wife would have to pay fines totaling $65.6 million. So we'll be following this story and seeing how events unfold.
$65.6 million.
That's too low. Too low. Probably owes more.
It's going to be interesting to see how Zain al-Abidine bin Ali receives this news in Saudi Arabia, just outside of Jeddah, isn't he?
Precisely.
Okay, Derek, thanks a lot for joining us via Skype from Jerusalem. We'll see you on Wednesday, and of course from next week you'll be back in the seat, and they'll kick me out of this place for all my
You're welcome anytime,
horrible
Imran.
substitute work. Thanks a lot, Derek. Natasha? Always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And Ahmed, great to have you on the show. And you've still got your job, don't you?
Yes, let's hope so.
Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow for the pre-show here in the stream.